On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very exclusive treat. He's a best-selling author and he researches, writes, and coaches on health, well-being, and sustainable excellence, just to name a few. He's a leading figure in exploring mental health, leaning into and engaging in change and mastery, and his teachings are useful to people from all backgrounds. Big facts. He's a faculty member at the University of Michigan's Graduate School of Public Health, and his books will penetrate your soul. He pens his popular blog, The Growth Equation, and he's made contributions to the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and more. His ability to inspire others to pursue success, well-being, and personal growth is second to none. And he's here to teach you all of his tips and tools on motivation, value-based success, and tapping into your peak potential so you can find lasting fulfillment. He's just a juggernaut in all facets of life and a terrific human being. Please welcome the brilliant, strategy-rich, and innovative, the handsome and practical, Brad Stulberg. How you doing, Brad?
I'm well, Craig. That's quite the intro. I hope I can live up to it. It's an honor to be here with you today.
I'm pumped that you enjoyed it. We were having a great conversation before we hit record, and you just my people, brother. And I mean that with all due respect. Like one of the coolest things that we get to do now on the podcast is interact with people that I've been a fan of it. And I'm so pumped to share you with our community. And my best suggestion to everybody listening right now, if you were not familiar with Brad up until right now, do a deep dive, play catch up, check out all the unbelievable things he has going on. What I think is most valuable now is we just have an unbelievable conversation. Before we dive in, we're going to get a little weird. You ready for me?
Let's do it.
What is your superpower?
My superpower, if I have any, well, I don't have any superpower, but if I had to take a stab, I think it's the ability to hold two competing ideas at the same time. Most people think in terms of this or that, and I certainly used to be one of those people. Over time, I've learned that life is complex, and the answer to most big questions is some variety of this and that. So, you think like, oh, I need to have self-discipline or self-compassion. And it's like, no, you need to have self-discipline and self-compassion. I need to push hard or I need to rest. No, you need to push hard and you need to rest. And trying to bring this kind of thinking to more and more of life is something that I pride myself on.
Wow, that's beautiful and deep. So not everything is black and white.
Yeah, it's always shades of gray, and it depends is not a sexy answer, but it's often the most accurate one.
Wow, I love that because it's become trendy or sexy to say, no, it's this or that. But sometimes it's like, wait a minute, let me think about that for a second, or let me see what feels good right now, or let me consider the alternative, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I love this. There's so many cool and exciting places that we could take this conversation. You have a new book coming out right now that's called Master of Change. Is that accurate?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I can't wait to dive in. All things change and so forth. I'm under some changes right now. Why this book and why now?
I think for many reasons, similar to your experience and similar to the experience of so many listeners, what I learned is a really universal experience, which is many people, myself included, are going through a lot of change in a very compressed period of time. So, in my own life, in the past 5 years, I quit my corporate job to write full time. I moved across the country. I became a parent for the first time. I became a
Congratulations.
parent. Thank you. I became a parent for the second time. Um, I suffered an injury that took me out of a sport that had been an enormous part of my identity. I became painfully estranged from specific family members, and I had a best-selling book. And this is all within 6 years. So I was just undergoing so much change at such an accelerating, intensifying pace that I couldn't help but pay attention and think about the issue. And then, of course, the crystallizing moment for me is the change that everybody experienced, which is the pandemic. And I distinctly remember being in my kitchen on my wife's iPad and reading all of these articles with some version of the headline, "When are things going to get back to normal?" And there was just something about the wording of that that really rubbed me the wrong way. I had like a visceral reaction to that, and I didn't know why at the time. But later, in researching and writing this book, I learned that things never get back to normal. And so much of our resistance to change And so much of our suffering is because we try to get back to normal, we resist change, we deny it, we avoid it, when in fact, change is just the natural order of things. And yeah, we do crave stability, but that stability is always recreating itself somewhere new. So the way to be stable with change, I've learned, is not to try to get back to how things were, but rather to be in conversation with change, to dance with it, and to co-create a new normal and have some agency in doing that.
This is so good. I love you already. There's that. I'm looking forward to building the friendship too. And you just helped me have a breakthrough, right? Because we have a brand new puppy, my fiance and I. He's 7 months. You may or may not hear him throughout the podcast. Hopefully you won't. But it's a definitely a big change for us, right? Especially because I still consider myself in the season of grind. Like it's only been 3 years. I still have that mentality like I've never arrived, and we're still growing rapidly. We're scaling, and I'm working a lot. Although it doesn't feel like work because I love it. But maybe in between meetings where I used to have 15 minutes, get some fresh air, whatever the case may be, clear my head. There's someone else besides me. There's a puppy, and there might not ever, now that I have a puppy and God willing kids in the not distant future, like this is the new normal for me, right? Like it's not going to go back to normal. This is part of change, and that's great. It's just a little different. And when you mentioned the pandemic, obviously not the same, but like people were saying on the news, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. Like there will never be what it was beforehand. Like work from home, like that's always going to be a thing to some extent now. We're doing a Zoom right now. I didn't even know what Zoom was before then. There's just certain things that you always have to be open to change and evolving and growing and leaning in, right? Like even look at AI.
That's right. The old way in the conventional model for thinking about change is rooted in this scientific theory called homeostasis that is over 150 years old. And homeostasis describes change is a process where a system goes from order to disorder and chaos, then back to order. And this has been the prevailing way to think about change, as I mentioned, for over a century. Only more recently have scientists stepped back and say, we're close, but that's actually not an accurate fit model for change. So we don't go back to order, we reorder. And they coined this term allostasis, which describes change as a pattern of order, disorder, reorder. So, yes, it's true. Living systems, human beings, we do crave stability, but we're constantly creating that stability somewhere new. And I find the most poetic thing is in the Latin root and etymology of these words. So, homeostasis, homo means same, and stasis means standing. So the word translates to stability by staying the same. Allo means variable. That translates to stability by changing. And that's it. Yes, we crave stability, but the only way to be stability, the only way to find stability is to change, at least to some extent, and to be in the process of changing. And like I was saying at the outset, I just think that there's so much futile resistance because we're stuck in this old model where we think that change is bad and we need to get back to where we were instead of realizing that all of life is change. To fear change is to fear life.
Right. Because what is the alternative of change?
There is
Status
a
quo.
death. Well,
Right.
like it's ultimately death. And, we can get esoteric, but on a cellular level, our cells are recycling, every minute we're changing. We're aging, we're meeting new people, we're having new life experiences. So we're changing internally. The external environment around us is always changing. So this default position that change is somehow abnormal just makes no sense.
One of the many reasons why I love your book, love the idea of it, is because it's not niche. It's applicable for anybody in any walk of life in some capacity that's willing to admit that change is inevitable, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I break the book down into these three core sections. And the first is how to develop what I call a rugged and flexible mindset. The second is how to develop a rugged and flexible identity. And then the third is how to take rugged and flexible actions. So let's start with rugged and flexible, right? This non dual thinking. Most people hear these two words and they say, what's this guy talking about? You're either rugged or you're flexible. These are opposites. To be rugged is to be really strong, to be durable, and to be flexible is to be soft, supple, to bend easily. And so many people fall into this polar extreme where I need to be this or that. But it turns out that in order to navigate all the change that life throws at you, whether it's in your personal life, your professional life, and to do it skillfully, you can't choose. You need to develop both of those qualities and you need to act on them at the same time. You need to be both rugged and flexible. So, what do I mean by this? What is rugged about us? I would argue that your ruggedness, these are the core traits and values that make you who you are. These are the defining features for how you think of yourself and how you want to show up day to day. Examples can be things like love, compassion, creativity, discipline, authenticity, vulnerability, hunger, drive, motivation. Regardless of what's happening around you, you can act on those values. So that's the ruggedness. The flexibility, however, is when the environment around you changes or you yourself change within yourself. You have to be really flexible in how you apply those values. You can't be too rigid. You can't hold on to them too tightly because if you do, you're going to get selected out. You know, there's that trite saying, adapt or die. And I think there's a lot of truth to it, but what it misses on is have your core values, know what those are, and then adapt or die.
Hmm. Yeah, because that kind of acts as like a compass. You always go back to your core values, right?
Yeah, the metaphor I like to use is of a river.
Mm.
So there's this famous quote, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus says that you can't step into the same river twice. And it's just a beautiful metaphor for what it means to be a human being. Like nothing's ever the same. However, when you look at a river, it's clearly there. Like there is a river, it's an objective object. So it's this thing that is both the same, but also always changing. And a river is not a river without its bank. If a river didn't have a bank, it would just be random water, it'd be a puddle. So part of what makes a river is that it has a bank. And I think that our core values, that's our bank. So we're going to flow throughout our life. You're going to spend time, in your case, Wall Street, single, issues with drinking, not a runner. Now you're a runner. Now you're off of Wall Street. Now you're doing this. All of that is your identity flowing like a river. But my guess is that you have some values that have guided that path. And that's it. I mean, that is how to navigate change skillfully in a nutshell.
Unbelievable. So in that specific analogy, is it that the river has changed or is it that we have changed and that's why we're not going to the same river twice or maybe both?
It's both. And that's it. I think that the philosopher Heraclitus, he's not talking about a river, he's talking about us.
Right. That's what I thought. Yeah, this is so good. For the audience listening, what is the sport that you used to love, play that you get an injury from?
I have a long history in athletics. So I grew up playing power sports. I was a pretty good football and basketball player. Early on in my adulthood, I transitioned to endurance sports. I got really into running. It became an enormous part of my identity. I ran marathons. Eventually, I went on to compete in an Ironman triathlon. So I was doing all the crazy long course, 8 to 12 hour races. And it was an enormous part of my life. It was how I derived a lot of meaning. A lot of my confidence came from the sport. A lot of my friends in community. And then I developed this condition in my lower leg that just completely prohibited me from participating in those sports. I had orthopedic surgery. It helped. It allowed me to do more, but I still couldn't really compete in a way that wouldn't put me in, pretty significant pain. So that was an enormous change in my life, was having to recreate my identity as an athlete. I can't run anymore. I can't really race a bike. So who am I if I'm not a triathlete? And that gets to the second part of the book, which is like rugged and flexible identity. So yes, we often think of change in terms of external things like artificial intelligence or climate or the pandemic or geopolitics. But then there's also all of these changes that happen within us. And nobody can escape because we all age, right? Like that's the change that comes for all of us. And aging brings with it great opportunity, but only if you engage with it. So back to my injury, and it's really a chronic condition. I can't run anymore. Like if I run, my calf feels like it's just going to blow up. So I had to recreate my athletic identity. And the way that I did that was by going back to my values and saying, I value health. I value excellence. I value pushing myself. I value community. But my core value is not running. Running was just the way that I express those things. So there's got to be other ways to express those things. I found myself a good gym. I got really into strength and conditioning training, powerlifting, and now that's my athletic identity. Will that be forever? Of course not. I'll get old, I'll have some other injury, I'll just get sick of it, and then I'll shift. But what's nice is that as long as I have those values, I can express them throughout my entire life. The way I express them will be different. Whereas if I just identified as a runner and that was it, it would have been the most painful, discombobulating blow up in my entire life. But because I stepped back and I said, my identity is not as a runner, my identity is someone that values health and athletics, it gave me flexibility.
Rugged and flexible.
It's the name of the game. The other way to think about this topic, because I think it's such an important one, especially my sense is that, you yourself, Craig, and your listeners are probably people that like want to go all in and pursue greatness in whatever it is that they're doing.
Correct.
And if you think of a house and you think of yourself like a house, you want to have multiple rooms in your house. Because if you just have one room, right? You live in a studio apartment and that room floods, you're screwed. I mean, your entire sense of identity is messed up. Whereas if you have other rooms, when there's a flood in one room, you can go seek refuge in another room. And the way that we think about creating our identity and sources of meaning in our life, I think has to be the same. I think it's really dangerous just to have one room, just to have the business person room, just to have the athlete room, just to have the relationship room. Even for parents, just to have the parent room. Why are so many people miserable when their kids move out of the house? Because their entire identity was raising their kids. Why are so many people, and especially athletes, suffering from depression and anxiety upon retirement? Because the only room in their house was their career. So contrary to common wisdom, I think it's possible to be great, and there are many examples of this, and to go all in and spend a lot of time in one room, because you have to do that to be great. But you never want to close the doors completely to the other rooms, because you never know when you're going to need them.
Yeah, it's so good. So good. It's funny how, not a coincidence, how it's like the right conversation at the right time, selfishly, even for me. And it's really for the listeners, but this is perfect time.
Can I tell a story on this topic? Because I can see that
Please.
you're digging this particular thing, and I think it's really important.
Please, brother.
So the common retort to this, or objection, which is a really good one, is, well, what about Michael Jordan? He was super obsessed. He only had that one room. And I would say a couple of things. I'd say number one, that's right. And Michael Jordan is someone whose temperament is very different than most people that achieve greatness. And there are multiple ways to achieve greatness. And the way that Jordan did it was by having one room and having a chip on his shoulder. You watch him in the Last Dance documentary, he's not the happiest dude. He certainly doesn't seem like the healthiest now, but he's the best of all time. I mean, some might yell at me and say now it's LeBron. But MJ was great, right? We're in the same generation, so we remember watching MJ. Kids these days don't even know who he is. It's crazy. So, all right, you got MJ, but then there are all of these other stories of people that were the best in the world at what they do, that did diversify their sense of self. So the one that to me is most inspiring is the speed skater Niels van der Poel. He skates the 10K and the 5K. And in the 2022, the most recent Winter Olympics, he won gold medals in both, and he set the world record. So he is the best speed skater to ever live. And van der Poel was struggling just a couple of years ago. And he did an assessment. He said, why am I struggling? And he identified that every time he stepped into the oval to compete, he was scared. He had fear. Then he said, well, why am I scared? Why do I have this fear? And the way he answered that question is because his entire identity, his entire sense of meaning in his life was wrapped up in speed skating. So he was carrying this enormous burden and this enormous weight, where if he failed or he got injured or he slipped, that was it. There was no more Niels van der Poel. He was only as good as his performance in the ring. So in the lead up to the 2022 games, he said, I have to change this. I'm going to train really hard during the week, but I'm going to do something that's unheard of for an Olympic class athlete. I'm going to have normal weekends. I'm going to go out and get pizza and beer with the guys. I'm going to go bowling. I'm going to go on hikes. I'm going to read books. I'm going to develop parts of my identity that are separate from speed skating. Van der Poel goes on to win both gold medals, become the best speed skater to ever live on the planet. And you know what he says helped him do that? The fact that he had other sources of meaning in his life. Because then when it came time to compete, He could do it from a place of love, not fear. He could say, whether or not I win this medal, I can still go on in my life. I know that I'm a person beyond this, so I don't have to be scared. I can go out there and play to win instead of playing not to lose. So I just think it's so important because this isn't just about health and fulfillment and well being. This is truly about excellence. And then you zoom out and you look across the research, and most people that are world class at what they do, they don't go the Jordan path. They go the Vanderpool path. It's not to say they're quote unquote balanced. You can't be balanced and be the greatest in the world.
An illusion.
Yes, balance is an illusion. You cannot do that, but it is so important to maintain other sources of meaning. I think this is why so many world class athletes are also religious because it allows them to say that, yes, football is a huge part of my life, but I'm also a Christian or I'm also Islamic, whatever the religion may be. And it's not like they're spending tons of time going to church, but there's this source of meaning in their life that is different than just the sport. And then they shed the fear. So if listeners walk away with anything, I think, and bringing it back to the topic of change, the way to have a rugged and flexible identity through change is to make sure that you're not one dimensional. You know this as an investor. Would anybody ever tell you to put all your assets in only one thing? No, you diversify your portfolio. Why? Because it helps you weather the ups and downs. So why don't we do that with ourselves?
Is gold, straight out. And for some reason, a name that came to mind when you were telling the story about Jordan was Michael Phelps. And I saw him recently speaking how, like, in his prime, when he was training, he was in the pool 365 days a year. And also, he's very vocal about struggling with mental health and a lot of stuff like that during that particular season. I imagine
Yeah,
that I didn't have much else.
and especially during his transition, right? When it came time to retire from competitive swimming, Phelps fell into a deep, deep depression and substance use disorder. Uh, and I think now, and I love Michael, I love how vulnerable he is.
Yes.
He's a real role model for that. I think now what Phelps would say is, I could have trained just as hard, but I could have also found other sources of meaning. I didn't just need to think about swimming 24/7. I could have read books. I could have developed some friends outside of the sport, just little things. And it wouldn't have taken away from his training, but it might have helped him through those dark times, or perhaps it would have prevented those dark times altogether. Because it goes back to that analogy, man. If you got a studio apartment and that room floods, you're fucked. But if you got multiple rooms in your house, you're going to be okay. You'll be able to weather that storm.
I think this is so beautiful. One of the things I've been talking about lately, speaking so forth, is that what success is not is dominating in just one arena, right? Like, I used to be very successful, and I quote, because at that season, I said making money meant you're successful. Obviously, it was much more unenlightened, and it's not. Being successful is striving to do well at all the things: relationships, career, wealth, faith, spirituality, fitness, all the things. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so romantic about running is because I found running at a time when I was desperately looking for another room in the
Another
house.
room. And that became your other room. It wasn't just an Excel spreadsheet or a bonus
No,
from the bank.
no. Yeah, and I stuck with it. In fact, I'm signing up. I just signed up for the New York City Marathon, which is in November. And it's interesting because I love what I do so much, but like when I'm running these days, it's like my biggest sense of peace. It's just that
Yeah.
other thing for me.
And it's so important to have because running is so different. Like, you're not worried about how many downloads your show got. You're not worried about whether or not you're going to get a book deal or if your speaking agent's going to get back to you.
Right.
You could be absolutely having a terrible week at this work, but then you can go find solace in running. And the opposite is true. My guess is, if and when you have your first major running injury, you'll double down on this part of your work. Or maybe
I,
you'll double
it
down on
happened to
spending
me.
time with your fiance. And I'll tell you what, you mentioned early, if you ever have kids, I'll tell you what, that's another room that is a really big room, and it's hard and it's challenging and all those things are true. But man, it helps put things in perspective. So in my own life, right, I always try to practice what I preach. I want to have skin in the game. I don't just want to be in the ivory tower telling people what the research says. I want to do it.
Right.
So I'm really explicit about this in particular. I've got a couple big rooms. I've got the husband and father room. We'll call it the family room. I've got the craftsperson room. That's as a writer. I've got the athlete room. And then I've got the community member and neighbor room. And without fail, when I hit lows in one or two of those areas, I just go spend more time in the others. That becomes the stability, the ruggedness that gets me through while the change sorts itself out elsewhere.
Can I ask you a deep question?
Of course.
In regards to another room, what about like faith or spirituality? Is that important to you?
Is very important to me. What I would say is that my spirituality comes through those other rooms. Like spirituality hangs over all of it. Um, so looking into my kids' eyes and seeing them laugh, um, my relationship with my wife, the deep friendship that we have, and the intimate, passionate love that we have, that is spiritual. Sitting down to write a book, taking something that is just like all over the place in my mind and then turning it into words that then someone like you reads and then talking about it, that's spiritual. Sitting on my front porch and showing up for my neighbors, that is so like important to my spiritual life. So I would say that it's not necessarily a room because it's just a part of everything. So maybe it's like the ultimate room. Maybe it's the house. I never thought of it, but
Foundation.
like maybe
Yeah.
spirituality is the house that holds all of this.
Breakthrough.
Because you could have those different rooms and kind of like not really have textured or deep relationships with any of them and just kind of be going through the motions.
Yeah.
And to me, spirituality is about like really touching life and living so deeply in it. So that's like the holding container. That's the house, at least for me. And different people think about spirituality a different way. For some people, it's a very clearly defined faith. For some people, it's going to church or synagogue or the mosque. For some people, it's meditation. Some people, it's nature. I think for me, it is really like striving for excellence in all of those domains. And what I mean by excellence isn't a score on a scoreboard. I mean, like, really, when it's time to do the thing, doing it fully, being so present that it's almost like a spiritual experience. I define spirituality as like getting outside of yourself. So when I'm having this conversation, I'm not like really thinking about the rest of my day or what I got to do or how I look. I'm in it.
Same.
When I'm writing a book, my brain, like, I am in the book. And those are the moments that I chase in life.
Yeah. I love this. And you nailed it before. Something happened to me 2 years ago when I was at a speaking engagement. I ended up getting injured doing something, and it was misdiagnosed. As it turns out, there was a tumor in my foot while
Mm.
I was training for a Chicago marathon. And I got surgery, came back benign, thank God. But there was recovery. There was a hole in my foot, and because I wasn't running, I doubled down on this stuff on a different room, and that's when I really started tapping into the law of attraction and all that stuff. Probably not a coincidence how it all happened, but you nailed it.
Yeah, and I think that another way to think about that is just like increasing your surface area. And what I mean by that is like if you think of yourself as like just having like this little itty bitty surface area and something happens to it, you're kind of screwed. But if you expand that, then something can happen here, but you're robust. You can absorb the change because you've got a bigger surface area.
Love it. This is great. There's so many things that I could ask you, and this whole conversation so far has been off the cuff, which are my favorites. But there's a couple things that I wanted to hit because I think they'll be super valuable for the audience. One of the things that you talk about, which I'd love for you to illustrate a little bit more, is the importance of expectations.
Yeah, ooh, this is a good topic. So, our expectations really dictate how we feel in any given moment. So the shorthand equation is our mood or our sense of peace or happiness is a function of our reality minus our expectations. So if our reality is different from what we expect it to be, we tend not to feel so great, especially if it's in the wrong direction, if we expected it to be better than it is. And one way to think about change is our expectations not being met. We predict that something's going to happen and it doesn't happen, or we're just kind of going through life and then boom, something blows up our reality. And following that equation, the worst way to handle that is not to update your expectations to like cling to what you thought would happen, because then there's that mismatch and you feel like crap. Whereas if in the moment you can say, all right, I was expecting X, but Y happened. I don't have to like it, but I just need to acknowledge that Y is the thing. You tend to actually feel a lot better and you empower yourself to do something productive of it. Because if you're clinging to old expectations and you're acting on old expectations, not reality, you're not solving anyone's problem. You're not working on the thing that needs to be worked on. Whereas if you can update those expectations to match reality, well, now you're actually making progress on the thing that you need to do. So I come back to that equation over and over and over. Happiness equals reality minus expectations. Now, some people might say, does this mean that I should become a pessimist and always have bad expectations? No, not at all. I think it's important to have a high bar. You know, I want to strive for excellence. I've said that word 10 times. There's nothing low bar about excellence, but it is important to have accurate expectations and to realize that when reality changes, you've got to shift to meet reality. Like, you've got to meet reality where it is. There's this quote in the book from Bruce Springsteen that says, being a mature adult is meeting the world on its terms without losing hope. So you can't meet the world on your terms, man. That's like living in expectations worlds. You got to meet the world on its terms and then bring to bear your unique skills, capacities to it.
Quoting Bruce Springsteen, the boss. I love it.
The only way, man, him and Jason Isbell. I want to get in a room with those two guys.
And you will. Can I ask you a question, brother? How old are you? How young are you, I should say?
I'm 37.
37 years young, just getting warmed up.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, you never know. Like I'm open to that too. I want to make the most of this opportunity while I have it because things are going to change. I don't know how they're going to go. I hope they go well. I am an optimistic person, but all we got is what's in front of us right now.
That's it. And that's one of the reasons why when I reinvented myself, I did this eulogy exercise where I considered if that was it for me at the time, was I okay with my legacy, my impact, my contribution? And the answer was hell no across the board. And I started to, and I almost felt like I was disrespecting my creator. Like, I know I'm here for more. I believe we all are. And so that helped create a bit of a sense of urgency. And one of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years is that, as you attested to a little bit earlier on, like mindfulness is that portal to expansion for me. What I mean by that is like me and you right now, all I care about in the entire world. How do I make this interaction as magical as I can, build solid rapport, and just deliver a great conversation that adds value to the listeners? And when you start to stack magical moments like that, it's also a great way to get out of a rut. Forget about what's bothering you or what you got later on. Just be super present in each and every single activity, whether it's a podcast, a fitness routine, hanging out with your kids, whatever it is. Be as present as you possibly can in each and every activity, right?
That's right. I know a surgeon, a really good surgeon, who suffers from pretty rough depression. And the place that this person finds solace is in surgery. Because when
Agree.
they're in surgery, they're just in it.
Agree.
Everything else melts away. Not all of us can go perform surgery, but if we can bring that kind of approach to whatever the meaningful activities in our own life are, I think we feel better, we do better. And again, like to me, spirituality is the dissolution of self. And the best way to lose yourself is in something or someone you love, straight up.
Yeah. The way you, wow, that hit home. When you were describing the surgeon, brought me back to when I discovered running at a time when I was desperately looking for something else besides my career, which I was miserable at. And I just remember whenever I was on a run, I wasn't worried about anything. All the stuff that I had going on at the time, which is that run.
Yeah, there's something about sport that is just beautiful. I have a mentor, and his go-to line whenever things feel out of control, he just says like, just go lift some weights. And you could sub that out for go on a run, but it's like do something real.
Yeah,
Give your body and brain something to pay attention to that's
yeah,
not just whatever problems you're facing in the moment.
yeah. What were you running marathons at what time, if you don't mind me asking?
Like how long ago or what? How fast was I or both?
Yeah, like what PRs, what times?
You're such a running nerd. We can nerd out about running. My PR in the marathon was 3:01. I never
Nice.
got under three. I really wanted to go sub three, and this calf thing just blew up on me and never happened. My PR for the half, I ran a really good half. It was a flat course. I ran 121. That was when I was like wicked fast.
It's nice. Yeah, I just did the Brooklyn half. I ran 131, which is really fast for me. But
Yeah, well, that's what's great about running. It's all relative,
yeah,
unless like you're truly a professional athlete, no one cares what you run. You're just trying to beat yourself.
that's correct. And that's one of the, it's so pure and beautiful. That's one of the things I love about it.
So you're gonna get the bug to try to go under 3 hours. It's like a
How do you
5 year
know? Why do you
journey.
say that?
Well, I think that if you ran 131 for the half, a good executed marathon, if I remember, like you double your time and add 10 minutes, you're probably at like 310, 311. So you'll break 310 if you haven't yet, and then the next big number is three.
It's so funny you say that because my PR was last Chicago in October. I ran a 331, but I totally died like the last 10. I was not doing the best I could with nutrition. That's on me. But now, for the first time ever after 6 marathons, I'm finally working with a coach because I just had this thought process like I want to know what I could really do if I had the proper guidance and not just run with heart and grit, actually have
Yeah.
a strategy. And right now I'm all in on my career and my fiance, and I have a lot going on. And to run at those levels, in my opinion, it's like a full-time job in itself. He seems to keep thinking I should be thinking sub 3. But I think for New York, I mean, I'd be happy with the sub 320. But
Well, New York's around the corner. It's a
yeah,
progression. What's
yeah.
nice about the 3 hour goal, and again, apologies to runners. I warned them we're gonna nerd out on running. I think that once you start to get under 3 hours, genetics like really matters. There's no denying it.
Mm,
But I think just about anyone with really good training and dedication can get to that 3 hour mark or right around it.
yeah,
And then to get below that, I think genetics matters because, you're a bigger dude. You're built more like me. My guess is your body responds really well to strength training.
correct.
So, you're not like a skinny marathoner.
I don't look like a
Um,
runner at all. 5'7",
yeah, so so
stocky.
so you got to accept that, like, I think back to not this or that, but this and that. I think people that say that it's purely talent and genetics and hard work doesn't matter are wrong. But I think that people that say all that matters is hard work and genetics don't matter are wrong. It's both. So you got to work with the genetics you got. And I think for most people, yourself included, probably puts you in the 3 hour neighborhood as like a big challenging goal. But don't think about it for this New York. I'd think about that over the next 2 to 3 years. Like give yourself some time.
Okay, done.
Yeah, it's a good goal.
Yeah, it is cool. It is fun, and I'm all about like the milestones in life are super cool. Like we just did the Wall Street Journal bestseller, but what I noticed, right, I had this feeling right after we got it last week, some similar to after a marathon. It's not the end result. It never is. It's the journey. It's the process. It's the ups and the downs, the peaks and the valleys, and that's really what it's all about. But all that being said, it is nice to have these big audacious challenges that you're excited about.
Yeah, I like I said, I'm gonna go back to that room where I think of myself, at least I aspire to be a craftsperson and a writer. And such a big part of that for me is metaphor.
Yes.
The metaphor that I love is a mountain. So you got to pick a peak to go for because otherwise, like, what are you doing? You're just kind of walking around. So it's important to pick a peak. But once you pick that peak, all your time is spent on the side of the mountain climbing up. And ideally, you're doing it with good people.
Mm,
And to me, that's the big audacious goal. Like it is important to have that peak, but then once you pick it, get on the mountain.
yeah.
Because that's where you're spending all your time.
Yeah, this is awesome. Only negative I got going on is we don't have 20 hours to chat, but I know it's just the beginning of the friendship. One of my superpowers, I asked you in the beginning, one of the things that I would humbly say about myself, and the irony is this superpower is available to everybody, and it just so happens to also be the word on your really cool hat, and that is consistency. And you often talk about how consistency is way more important than intensity. I couldn't agree more. Love for you to dive in on a little bit about that.
All right. So a big trap that people fall into is they get really excited about something and then they immediately go all in and they do too much too soon and they burn out, they flame out. This is why New Year's resolutions, very few people make it past 2 months because they say, I'm going to
Get
lose
that.
weight. I'm going to lose 10 pounds right away, or I'm going to get into running. I'm going to run a 50-mile week right off the bat. And boom, you have a stress fracture or something stupid happens. Uh, Intensity is really sexy though. It's like this bright and shiny object. What do you post on Instagram? You post your heroic workout, your all-nighter at the office. You are in finance, right? Not a banker bro loves nothing more than to talk about, sleeping at the desk. And we're drawn to those because like they're really compelling stories. But when you look at people that perform at a world-class level for a long period of time, they don't have too many of those stories. Their story is I show up day in and day out and I might not ever be a 10 out of 10. Or in the case of someone that has to peak for a performance, maybe I'm a 10 out of 10 once or twice a year, but you better believe it. I'm a 7 or an 8 out of 10 every damn day. Feel great? I show restraint because I know I don't want to burn myself out. 8 out of 10. Feel like shit? I still show up day in and day out. And the mantra that I like, it's on my hat, consistency over intensity. Good enough over and over and over again is how you get to great. So just be good enough, but be ruthlessly good enough. Be good enough all the time, and that's how you can create something that's great. Another way to think about this is human performance is a complex system, right? There are so many things that go into performance in anything, in running, in investing, in writing, in relationships, in managing, leading, building a company, you name it. And something about complex systems is they have all these interacting parts and they have an emergent property, which is what you get out of all these interacting parts. And in complexity science, if you focus too much on optimizing one of those parts, the whole system can blow up. So the best way to have a good complex system is to get every part functioning at like a 7 or 8 out of 10. And then the emergent property of that is a 10 out of 10. And I think we're the same way. Like, I know this is going to sound sacrilegious to some people, but like, I don't care how many 10 out of 10 days you have. I care that you're 7 or 8 out of 10, 365 days a year.
I mean, doesn't get better than this. And I imagine that's very on in alignment with the other thing that you say, which is become a master at showing up. They go hand in hand, consistent showing up.
Yeah, you got to show up. You got to show up when you don't feel like it, when you do feel like it. It's not to say that you should like repress feelings or fake it till you make it. It's just acknowledging that part of being a human being is having times when everything is clicking and you're motivated and you're stoked and you want to crush it. And part of being a human being is having times when you're apathetic, when you're anxious, when you're scared, when you're depressed. And you can honor all of those feelings and still show up and you take those feelings along for the ride. You say, hey, excitement, I'm glad you're here. Hey, motivation, like this is great. Everything's clicking. I'm going to go get it and I'm going to be so happy. 2 days later, oh man, like depression, I see you. You want to come back? I feel you. I see you. You're trying to protect me. I'm not going to repress you. I'm not going to resist you, but I'm also not going to let you dictate what I do. I'm just going to show up. And it's that same, you take those feelings along for the ride and you show up.
Love it. Love it so much. And I know we keep kind of reverting back to sport, ironically, but it reminds me of like those times when you didn't want to go for that run or you didn't want to get that strength training workout in, but you went to the gym anyway. Those end up being some of your best workouts.
Yeah, the podcast host Rich Roll of the Rich Roll Show, I think he puts it best. He says mood follows action. So to elaborate on that, you don't need to feel good to get going. You need to get going to give yourself a chance at feeling good. And never prejudge a workout, a writing session, a meeting based on how you're feeling before, because you can always surprise yourself. Mike Posner, the recording artist who I interviewed for my last book, The Practice of Groundedness, he told me that he thinks of it like this. When he's feeling like shit, showing up and getting started in the studio or in fitness, whatever it might be for him, doesn't mean he's going to feel better, but at least he gives himself a chance.
Unbelievable. So good. This is so divine timing for me. And I think this stuff is so important, right? We could talk about strategies and tactics and all that stuff all the time. Those are great too. But I think that this mentality and giving yourself a little bit of grace and being committed, not just interested. And I saw something else that you said, which I thought was really powerful and hit home. And that's that after big wins or devastating defeats, the best medicine is to get back and get back to doing the work itself, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because, neurons that fire together wire together. And you don't want to get caught up in the external validation because then you'll come to crave it more. And the best way out of that trap is just to come back to the work. Your book hits the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. Celebrate for a night, maybe even two, but then get back to doing the work. Give yourself some time, experience the joy, get back to the work. Your book misses the Wall Street Journal list. Let yourself feel down for a night. That's okay. It was a big goal. You worked hard. You didn't get it. That sucks. 24 hours later, get back to the work.
Yeah.
Because it's the process where the real joy and fulfillment is. The bright and shiny objects, they're nice, but they're fleeting, man. They come and they go. The process is where we spend all of our time.
So I agree with you 1,000,000%. It's part of my mission to help other people understand that, right? That's why I always have to say, like, marry the process, divorce the outcome. It's never in the end result, no matter how good, right, that it is. Because I asked a bunch of people, specifically someone that comes to mind is Tom Bilyeu. He sold the Quest company for
Yeah, no, now he's got a podcast that's really, really good. Yeah, I know Tom.
He sold his company maybe for billions, something like that. And he said, and he's like, what most people, and I couldn't agree more. After the peak, like when most people climb that mountain, if you ask 100 people, they're thinking about probably one thing at the top, and that's what's the next mountain.
What's the next mountain? Yeah. Alex Honnold, free solo climber, rock climber, has
Yes.
done insane feats. I've gotten to interview him a handful of times, and man, that's his mentality. Like he gets to the top, he enjoys the ride, and then he says, "All right, what's next?" And
Yeah.
oftentimes it can be really hard for people after a big success because, like you said, nothing really changes.
No.
Ray Allen, my opinion, again, we're going to date our age because the young kids are always like, "What about
Shooter.
Steph Curry?" Steph Curry's good too, but ain't nobody shoots like Ray Allen. Uh, Ray Allen, after he won his first championship, said that the morning after was one of the hardest, most confusing mornings in his life because he thought winning a championship would make him content and bring him peace. And he woke up the next morning and he looked at his ring and he said, "Well, fuck, what now? I'm still here. You know, it's just a ring." Um, and I think that's the danger of getting too attached to an outcome is even when it goes well and even when you get it, it always leaves you wanting because true fulfillment, sound like a broken record, it's in doing the work. Hitting the bestseller list, that's literally a line on a sheet of paper that is in print for a day. Writing a book, coming up with ideas, talking to people, that's how you spend 99.9999% of your time. That's what matters.
It's so funny. I thought I was gonna finally take a little bit of time to like decompress after 3 years of going nuts after the last week, and really this conversation with you has just basically confirmed what I already kind of felt. I just want to get back at it.
And I think it's okay to rest, but just like in a sense, you're doing this. Like again, I want to be clear. I'm not like a masochist. I think it's good to celebrate when you achieve a goal. Like I hope that you went out and had a nice night or whatever and
I do it
found
with
some
my family.
peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then give yourself some time to shut things down. But just don't get too caught up in that cycle of like, oh, I made it. I'm gonna sit here and think about how I hit the bestseller list, or think about how I'm a champion, or think about how I raised that round, because then like you're kind of training your brain that what matters is the status or the external, not the internal.
Yeah. And that's why there was something called, I remember a few years ago when I was running, there was something called a marathon hangover. It's like
Yeah, the post marathon blues. Yeah, same
the
thing.
post marathon blues. Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's it. Like you finish the big race and you're like, oh, I kind of feel shitty because it doesn't really change you.
No, no, it
The
doesn't.
the well, the process changes you for sure, but the result doesn't change you. The result's just a thing. It's just time on a clock.
100%. And it's really, let's be honest, it's all the training, the setbacks, the challenges, the tough.
That's what changes you, not whether or not you go 259 or 301.
Yeah.
It's the process. Fall in love with the process.
Yeah.
And you do that, the results take care of themselves.
Correct.
The people that are worried about results, well, they're not doing the work because they're too busy stressing about the results. So they're not going to get great results.
Yeah.
But the people who kind of know the peak they're heading for, they have that direction, they know what mountain they want to climb, but then they focus on the journey. Those are the people that end up with the best results, anyways.
Because it's just a byproduct of doing great work.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep. I like to think about it. Every moment of energy that you waste thinking about a result is a moment of energy that you could be having fun with your friends or your family or doing the work. So why would you waste it thinking about something in the future?
Yeah. This is unbelievable. We'll land the plane with this. We talked a lot about peaks, valleys, and ups and downs, so forth, and embracing all of them. But it's no secret that you're really, really, really good at staying more in a level of peak performance, maybe than most. What is a tangible strategy somebody can utilize right now to try to stay in that frequency a little bit more often?
I think it's this notion of showing up. So don't wait to feel good to get going. Just get going. Because you say that, and I'm honored that you say that, but the truth is, most days I don't feel like training. Most days I don't feel like writing. I want to sit in bed just like the next person. Netflix calls my name just as much as it calls your name and everybody else's. Why? Not because I'm weak, but because I'm a human. So I don't judge myself. I just learn that it's like, yeah, like it is what it is, but I'm gonna get going. And then once I get going, I feel great. So if I say like if I were to have to wait to feel good to train, I would train 20 days a year. But because I know that I don't have to feel good to train, I just need to start training. I train basically every day and I always feel better after. So mood follows action in the words of Rich Roll. You don't need to feel good to get going. You need to get going to feel good. That'd be the first thing. And then the second core tactic is just back to master of change, not rugged or flexible, rugged and flexible. So many people have a mindset where they define themselves in either one way. Either I'm Zen, I'm like water, like Bruce Lee said, I'm just going to go with the flow, or I'm going to will the world the way that I want it, and I'm going to take control and I'm going to exert my agency. And the truth is, to navigate excellence over the long haul, you got to be both those things.
I think the biggest misconception that I see in like our space kind of is that everybody thinks that all these high achievers, like everyone that I've had on the podcast and some of my friends like you, thinks that all of us high achievers are always motivated.
Oh, no,
That
not
couldn't
at
be
all.
farther from the truth.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really just like, do you have a system in place that allows you to show up and do the work? And
Yep.
sometimes that system means a therapist, a coach. Sometimes it means leaning on your community. I mean, all the time, I think it means those things for a lot of people. So yeah, this notion of like the perfect genius is just bullshit. Like everyone goes through highs and lows, and all we can do is navigate them as best as we can.
Um, Love this, brother. I think I know the answer, but just in case for the listeners, what's the best way to support you? What are you most excited about? How can everybody grab the book immediately? And are there some bonuses that come with it if you pre-order?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I'm most excited right now about the book Master of Change. I think it's my best work yet. The early reviews are just amazing, which makes me smile and really warms my heart because they're from people I respect. You can get the book wherever you get books from. You can get it from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore. It's available in hard copy and audio, Kindle, pretty much any way you get or read books or listen to books. And then if you pre-order the book, there's some really neat bonuses, including an online masterclass on change. And we can make sure that we pop those in the show notes. But you can also just go to www.masterofchangebook.com, and the instructions are there on how to order and get those bonuses.
I love it. And I know personally firsthand how important it is for the authors to be supported with the pre-launch phase. And so whether if you guys plan to buy the book anyway, which I highly suggest you do, now is a good time to grab it as any. Did you do the Audible yourself?
I didn't do the Audible myself. Did you do your Audible yourself?
I did. Pretty demanding.
Yeah, so I was going to and I was excited. And then my editor, God bless her heart, she said, like this is going to be 4 days, 9 hours a day, a very exacting process. Um, and I ultimately decided that like I know myself. I don't think I really enjoy that. I don't know about you, but I cringe whenever I hear myself speak. Like it just makes me uncomfortable. So same guy that narrated my last book, The Practice of Groundedness, he does this full time. He's a voice actor, and I really like him. I think he's a cool dude. So like he's my alter ego. So he reads this book too. And my hope is that throughout my career, I can always partner with him. So readers or listeners, I should say, have the same experience.
I love it. Yeah, makes perfect sense. I'm so proud of you, brother. You're fun to watch. I'm a fan. Your work
Thank you.
is helping me. It's going to help millions of others. And I'm so pumped for you with the book and so much more to come. Brad, hang up for 1 second. I want to connect with you after.
All
I,
right, that sounds good, Craig. Appreciate you.
I want you to know you the definition of wisdom, perspective, and consistency. I can personally guarantee your best is yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless, juicy nuggets today.
Appreciate you.
That was great, man.
Cool, man. Yeah, I felt like we were in a nice groove. That was good. Hopefully
100%.
listeners dig it.
They will. And I love what you're all about. I'd love to stay
Thanks,
connected.
man. Yeah, you got my email now, so let's stay in touch. I look forward to checking out your book.
Yeah.
I just popped it in my Amazon cart.
Awesome. Do you ever come out to New York?
I do. I don't have anything scheduled right now, but generally, like once or twice a year, I speak out there. So I'll be sure to hit you up because it'd be great to just sit down or go for, I guess I can't really run, but like a hike or something, or
Yeah.
get a
Or at
get a
the
get a
very
coffee or a
minimum,
beer.
if
Yeah,
our calendars permit, I'd love to grab a coffee.
yeah, that'd be great, man.
Can we exchange numbers?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Okay. Do you have your phone? I'll give you mine.
Yeah, text me. It's